So we're finishing our series today thinking about discovering Christ this Christmas. We've been thinking on the first week about being hidden before time, and Tracy helped us to think about Jesus, who always did exist. He was the creator of the universe, he's the living God, and he came into this world as light. And in our second week, we thought about being hidden in plain sight, and we thought about Jesus being visible in creation, the glory of God seen throughout this world. We thought about people like Moses at the burning bush and people throughout the Old Testament who encountered Jesus. They wouldn't have called him Jesus, and often the phrase the Bible uses is the angel of the Lord. And so Moses, Gideon, and Tracy shared about some people in the Old Testament that Jesus met with them. And I just think it's been really helpful to me to be reminded that Jesus didn't pop into existence 2,000 years ago as a baby in a manger. He always was right there at the beginning, at work throughout the whole of history. And we thought about, of course, Jesus being hidden in plain sight within Mary as she carries that child, Jesus, with him. And then last week we thought about hidden to bring freedom, and we thought about the chains that Jesus comes to set us free from. And then today we're going to finish up the series by thinking about hidden to be made known. And one of the things I think is really amazing about the nativity story is there was no kind of PR person involved. There's no one saying to God, you know, if you want your son to look really kingly, this is the way you should do it. Because let's just look at some of these things. Jesus, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, is born into poverty. Well, God, that's really not the right look, is it? Is that really what we're going for? Born into a family, Mary, pregnant before she's married, scandalous in that culture. Mary is rejected. And by association, Jesus is rejected. We don't want you. We don't want your sort. We don't want people like you here. We think about the long journey to Bethlehem, this painting that I came across several years ago that really transformed the way I thought about the Nativity. Fritz von Uhde painted this. It's painted in his time. It's completely inaccurate. But in another way, that just a sense of the bleakness in this story of Mary and Joseph trudging down the road to Bethlehem. And there may have been a singing, dancing donkey at the living nativity yesterday, but the Bible doesn't mention one. I'm not saying there wasn't one. It's interesting we've inserted this major character into the story where they may well have walked. They may have gone on a cart. We don't know how they travelled. But it was a long way. And I tell you something, and I tell you this with authority as someone who's never been pregnant, but has been on journeys with someone who has been heavily pregnant. That is no fun for that person. And that's my limited experience. They could explain that in much greater detail, because no fun, it's just not good to be travelling anywhere when you're ready to pop. And ready to pop, obviously, is a medical term I'm using in that sense. So they're on this long journey to Bethlehem. There's bleak circumstances. Everything is dark. Everything is hard. Everything is painful. This isn't the happiest story. It's like an episode of EastEnders, isn't it? And then they're born in Bethlehem. Now, when we think of Bethlehem, we think, oh, Bethlehem, wonderful. But Bethlehem is a place no one would ever have heard of. It was King David's ancestral city. But over the years, it had just become like, where? It's a bit like when you say to someone, Trowbridge. Trowbridge. One of the things that astonishes me as someone who moves into Trowbridge 2.5 years ago is the way people are so negative about Trowbridge. Trowbridge is terrible, it's horrible, it's not how it used to be, Trowbridge. Can any good thing come out of Trowbridge? You might say. And I find that quite sad, because I think it's actually quite a good place as someone who's moved in here, and we're very happy living here. And Bethlehem had that kind of sense to it. Where are you going? We're going to Bethlehem. Where? It was ordinary. And when the wise men, the Magi, they come to Herod and they say, where is it? Where has the King of Kings been born? And he's surprised that the prophecy points to Bethlehem. Where? It's not the right spot. It's not the Instagrammable photo opportunity. King Jesus, an asylum seeker, barely escaping with his life. It's staggering, isn't it? The topic of refugees, asylum seekers, people who've entered our country illegally. Really hot topic, all sorts of opinions. My view, as you know, is I think we should be fully welcoming to everyone. You might not agree with that, but I think we should be loving of everyone is what I would insist on. But Jesus was an asylum seeker. Jesus entered the kingdom of Egypt illegally with his family. He didn't go to customs and have his passport stamped. They were running away for fear for their life. And one of the things that often gets lost in the asylum seeker debate is these are people, if they're genuine, who have fled for their lives. And I think we should be much kinder to them than we are in our country. And they should know they're safe. Obviously, if they're not genuine, they should be sent back. I don't object to that. But as a country, I want us to be a welcoming country. And it's great to see people from different backgrounds and nationalities here in the church. And everyone is welcome here. And that's important. And I'm left with the question, when I go to an average nativity service, or even a really good nativity service, I'm left with the question, why do churches gloss over the reality in the nativity? Because God has gone to all that opportunity, all that effort to come into this world as one of us. He's come into this world as someone that anybody can relate to. And we've taken this story and kind of Disneyfied it. We've sentimentalised it. We've taken out the icky bits. You'll never see King Herod slaughter the innocents in a nativity play, and well, perhaps that's a good thing, I suppose. But it's an interesting one. It's something we would rarely talk about. And it's just such a disturbing part of the story. And I'm left with the question this Christmas time, what Jesus are we making known? And we sing some silly carols. We sing, "Little Lord Jesus, no crying he makes." Well, that's just stupid, isn't it? Have you ever, maybe you didn't cry? And where does it come from? It comes from that old-fashioned notion that if you have a good baby, they don't cry. And if you have a naughty baby, they cry. Whereas, of course, we know now babies cry because they're hungry, or because they've left a little present in their nappy, or any of those things. They're not being naughty, they just cry because that's how they communicate, don't they? And one of the things we need to work out how we do is how do we take some of this stuff out that's just nonsense and actually say, God come into the world. I remember going to a nativity service several years ago, and I could tell you everything about what happened factually. There was angels, there was shepherds, there was even a donkey. It must have been legitimate. But I wouldn't have known from the telling of that story that Jesus was God and why he came. And I guess that's the question I'm kind of asking this morning. It's great to tell the story and say, this is how it came about. But actually, when you look at this list of stuff, and you could probably add to it, how do we say Jesus has hidden himself in this tragedy? Jesus has hidden himself in this bleakness. The light of the world is in this darkness. And we have the opportunity to tell that story to those who are suffering, those who are struggling, those who can't make ends meet, those who are thinking, how am I going to pay my next bill? The nativity story is for them, if we tell it as it is. Moving on, thinking about Jesus being hidden to be made known. This is from Mark chapter 1, verse 40. A man with leprosy came and knelt in front of Jesus, begging to be healed. "If you're willing, you can heal me and make me clean," he said. Moved with compassion, Jesus reached out and touched him. "I'm willing," he said, "be healed." Instantly, the leprosy disappeared and the man was healed. Then Jesus sent him on his way with a stern warning. "Don't tell anyone about this. Instead, go to the priest and let him examine you. Take along the offering required in the law of Moses for those who've been healed of leprosy. This will be a public testimony that you have been cleansed." But the man went and spread the word, proclaiming to everyone what had happened. As a result, large crowds soon surrounded Jesus, and he couldn't publicly enter a town anywhere. He had to stay out in the secluded places, but people from everywhere kept coming to him. Secluded Jesus, there's a title for a sermon, and Tracy will be bringing that to you in the new year. And what I just wanted to highlight was this phrase here where Jesus says to this person in Mark, don't tell anyone. I've done this amazing thing for you. Just tell the priest so everyone knows it's okay, but don't tell anyone else. And this happens several times in the first half of Mark's Gospel where Jesus does something really remarkable. He says, don't tell anyone. And it's really mysterious. And where it ends is when Jesus says to his disciples, who do you think I am? And Peter says, you're the Messiah. And then Jesus goes up the mountain with a few of his disciples and he's transformed or transfigured before them. He glows white and they're like, oh, he is the Messiah. And after that, he doesn't ask it of anyone again. It's strange, whether it's to do with that and timing or what it is. Why? Well, here's some reasons I think it could be, but honestly, we don't know. Possibly he was saying, don't tell anyone, because he was frightened. He didn't want, I retract the word frightened, he didn't want to happen what did happen, in that he couldn't go into town because he got mobbed by people. So is it don't tell anyone because I need to move around freely? Is it don't tell anyone because he wants people to encounter him for themselves? So in other words, he would say to us today, to you as an individual, do you have faith in me? Not me, but Jesus is saying that. Jesus is saying to you, do you have faith in him? Not do you have your parents' faith or the faith of the person who introduced you to him. It's not about them, it's about you. He wants you to have your faith in him. He wants you to encounter him for himself. Is it to do with what he said when he turned water into wine? And his mother says to him, help, do something. And he says to her, my time has not yet come. Is it just one of those weird timing things? It's not time yet. But he still does it. I find that really interesting. That he says, my time, the Heavenly Father has said, not yet, but I'll do it for you, Mum. And I think there's actually something, it sounds really wrong, doesn't it, to disregard an instruction of the Heavenly Father to do it for your mum. But actually, when you think about it, it's something that's quite beautiful in the honouring of your parents. He wants followers and not customers. He doesn't want people queuing up saying, well, I've hurt my leg, can you have a look at it? He wants people who wants to know him, and of course he can bring healing and restoration to people. What about you? Has anyone got any other thoughts? And we don't know. You're welcome to shout out anything. Anyone got any thoughts? Why the secrecy? Any theories? Go on, Al. You know you want to.
I'm sorry. If you want something to be spread, you tell someone in secret, don't you?
Ah, there we go. So he told them to encourage them to tell people. Don't tell anyone. Okay, there we go. So was it clever PR marketing skills after all?
Yeah, that's what it is.
That's exactly what you heard it here first. That's good. I like that. Oh, as I said earlier, we don't know, do we? No, but it's an interesting perspective, and I'm just interested in perspectives because it doesn't make sense in many ways unless you take it that kind of way. Anyone else? No. Well, while you're eating your lunch later, if you think of something, ring me up. Or if you think of something at 3 a.m, don't ring me up. Let me know later. Why the secrecy? Well, we don't know, but there's some reasons. But what it did leave me thinking was this idea of telling the people the why before the who. Or to put that a different way, if someone that I know said to me, tell me about your faith, why is it important to you? I've discovered over the years, sometimes it's wisest to point to our experience rather than pointing to Jesus. So I was brought up in a church where Jesus was the answer. What was the name of the donkey that Mary rode? Jesus! No, not quite that. Jesus is it. You've got to do Jesus. But I also know that in our country, and some people would argue whether this is to a greater or lesser extent, I think it's actually getting better. In our country, I would say there is a broad prejudice against the church and Christianity. A kind of, oh, we don't do it. And to the point, and you will have experienced this, where you say to someone you know, you go to church, and they'll say to you something like, oh, you're not one of them, are you? Do you understand? It's that sense of, oh, we don't do it, that's so old-fashioned. We don't do that anymore. And so one of the things I've learned over the years is to stop saying Jesus and to start saying the difference he makes in my life. So to put it a different way, how do we find ways to talk with people about Jesus that bypass any prejudice about Christianity? So in other words, if someone said to me, why is your faith so important to you? I would say something like, it's amazing to me just knowing that God is with me always. And I would then inject whatever my reality was in that moment. If I was stressed, I'd say, and it's amazing the peace it gives me in stress. If I was ecstatic, let's say Wolverhampton Wanderers have won the Premier League. Can we believe in miracles, right? Not the best illustration, but I'd be saying, I believe that God is with me and he celebrates with us in life. Do you see what I mean? So you declare your truth and you add a little bit of something. And then in that moment they can say, oh, what's that? What? And then you can then share about it. And of course you talk about Jesus. I'm talking about sometimes we need to talk about the reality of our experience. Because what people are interested in is what works for you. What works for you. And so sometimes it's smart to approach it that way. Several years ago, I took on the role in the Eastern Baptist Association, who I worked for, to do their communications. And I took some time, I took 3 months out on a sabbatical to think about different ways we communicate online. And that was revolutionary in my thinking, because my thinking as a church leader used to be, everywhere you could on your church publicity, you wrote, come to my church. Come to my church. And what dawned on me as I thought about communication, and you communicate in a way that resonates with people and you try and get a message that they're going to go, oh, I'm really interested in that. And when you stop and you think most people don't want to come to church in our country, it then struck me as being fairly pointless to make our prominent message come to my church. And it also struck me whether that was actually a biblical message. Did Jesus ever say, come to a building? It's interesting, isn't it? Anyway, and so I'm having this thought process. And so actually, when you communicate with people online and through social media, you need to think of it not more. Often we think of it like, do you remember in the olden days when you wanted to sell your bicycle? You went to the newsagents with your little card and you went, I want to sell my bicycle. And they stuck it in the window. And we think of social media like that. We stick something up. But social media is much more interactive. And so now, rather than saying, I want to sell my bicycle, you would now be saying, my bicycle's got how many gears? Oh, it's got 2 wheels. And, think, why are they going to want to buy my bicycle and not their bicycle? And so you're trying to, you don't have to say, I'm trying to sell my bicycle. You're trying to tell them all this stuff because you've got all this space. But you want people to come back and ask you questions and interact with them. And so that was a massive shift in my thinking now, to think of our online communications as publicity, as an act of an influencer, not the act of someone saying, do you like my organisation? I want to influence you to be interested in Jesus. And how does that translate to our everyday lives? How can we learn to be honest about our experience and leave space for discussion? To say, guess what happened to me? In the same way as you would if you went to Tesco's and they were saying, something is 2 for the price of 1. You think, I've been waiting to buy those. That's wonderful. And we tell people that stuff, don't we? Or other supermarkets exist. And when good things happen in our lives, and we heard it in our roving mic this morning, people who've had good news and answers to prayer, and they've shared that, we should tell people about that. And when we're with people tomorrow who aren't Christians, rather than in a church with other people who believe or are interested, we need to get better at thinking, how can I share with some of those people? Say, guess what happened to me? Because people are really interested in that sort of stuff. Jesus is hidden in you. And will we let him shine through, especially through the cracks? And one of the things I say to myself sometimes is it's okay to be cracked. It's okay to be damaged. It's okay to be hurt. Lots of you are aware of the kintsugi image we use on the screen and the phrase about finding hope and restoration in the reality of life. And we've been praying and thinking about whether we can come up with a different image that conveys our messages of hope and restoration. I don't think we can, but I had an experiment with AI that came up with the image I'm about to show you. And we're definitely not using this in our publicity, and I can explain to you why at length later. But I want you to think about it in this moment. a kintsugi lighthouse, bringing hope to the world. And I look at this and I think this is just a perfect visual illustration, except it looks like it's going to explode. It looks like its head's going to go, and I just really, it speaks to me, and it may not speak to you, I don't know. And I love the sense that this thing looks like it's about to explode, but whether or not it will is dependent on what is holding it together. And in life, we feel sometimes like we're going to explode, don't we? I can't carry on, I can't cope. And in those moments, it's Jesus that's holding us together. We shine like lights for him because he holds us together. We have found hope and restoration in him, so we can share that hope and restoration with others. And rather than say, my life is imperfect, things have gone wrong, we let him shine through those experiences. And I think more than ever, we need to be known as good news people rather than people who are against stuff. And one of the things I think is absolutely brilliant about the nativity story is that God's plan is worked out through a single mum-to-be. The kind of person who, if they walked into many churches, people would tut and roll their eyes and we want their sort here. We would look down on people like that in some churches. And we don't want to be a church like that. We want it to be a good news church. I want to be the kind of person who says to someone, there's a better way, rather than, what do you think you've done? And I think sometimes we've got to work out how we pitch that, because there are times we need to say, actually, this is wrong, or we don't agree with that. I've got no problem with that at the right time, but that should not be our dominant message. I don't think when we look at Jesus, that was his dominant message. And we've got to get really smart about how we can say, actually, I don't agree with that, but neither do I condemn you. And I think that's really beautiful, the way Jesus was able to do that. And he says to the woman caught in adultery, he doesn't condemn her, but he tells her to go and sin no more. And so there's a real kind of mixed, there's a grace-filled message, but he's saying, there's a better way. There's a better way. So, do we want to make the real Jesus known? And just here's a few random thoughts here as we come to finish. In everyday life, questions are better than commands, and discussions are better than declarations. What do I mean by that? I mean, when I was trained to do evangelism many years ago, we were given stuff to tell people. It was like machine gun evangelism. I'm giving you all this stuff, whether you like it or not. And I've come to the place now where I've learned that it's much better to say to someone, something like I shared earlier, and they can say something to you, and you can say something to them, and you have a conversation about something where God might touch their heart, rather than letting them have it all with both barrels. I think one of the things that's really interesting about making Jesus known is Jesus said, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. What is in here is what will come out. And I think if we have no desire to tell anyone about our faith, I'm talking about wanting to, not whether you do or not. If we have no desire to tell anyone about our faith, my question to you is, how real and alive is that faith inside you? And I don't say that to criticize or beat you with it, because God is within you, however small that spark is. He's in there doing stuff. But my question is often, if we got that, we just talk about stuff that is important to us, don't we? My son and daughter and grandson are with us at the moment, and if you talk to me later, you're going to hear about it, because it's exciting. Does that make sense? What do we talk about? What comes out? How can we? And sometimes when we don't have that desire to talk about our faith, the answer isn't to try harder. The answer is to fall more in love with Jesus. And say to God, can you be doing more things in my life? Can you be born in me today? Can your light shine through me, even through my cracks? Will we speak and be good news to people who are hurting, pointing to a better way rather than condemning them? And how can we just learn to be more honest about our faith? So here's a thought for you before we finish with a story. If you had 30 seconds to tell someone one thing about your faith, and how it makes a difference to you, what would it be? Don't overcomplicate it. If you can think of 20 things, just dwell on one. It doesn't matter. what would it be? Does anyone, don't give me the 30 seconds, just what would it be about? Just shout some things out. And I'll repeat them for the recording. What would it be about? What sorts of things? Hope? Sorry? Peace? Love? Sorry? Answers to prayers? I must be over Christmas because I was sure you said antlers. And answers to prayers makes more sense. Thank you for that. I think my hearing's really going. Anyone else? Strength to cope?
Yeah, I was basically going to say the same thing. It gets you through tricky situations.
Yeah.
Normally just flow it.
Brilliant. And so some really helpful examples there. And I'd encourage all of us to think about this. Think about this. Because my experience is, if at the beginning of the day I say to God, I'd love to tell someone about you today, I will usually have this sort of experience where I meet someone who doesn't know Jesus. Unless I'm at home by myself, in which case I probably won't. If you do this and walk the dog or go and catch a bus or something, you will have the opportunity. What would you say? And without wanting to machine gun them to spiritual death, what is that one thing you could say that allows them to initiate that conversation? And that's what we should be keeping alive in it. And actually, it's some of those things, all those things were generally true for all of us, but some of them were also personally true to you in your experience. And I think particularly when people who know us ask that question and know our story, that can be even more powerful. Thinking about Christ this Christmas, one of the best ways you can tell someone about Jesus this Christmas time is by saying, come to our Christmas Eve service, come to carols on Christmas Eve. And it's just a really simple way you can do that. So do try and do that if you can. Let's finish with a story, then we're going to worship. And in our worship, we're going to be thinking about Jesus is the light of the world and how we can share our faith with people. Sam was in the dark and he was terrified. The day had started so well as he and some friends had set off to explore a local cave system. As they'd entered the dark unknown, they felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. They knew that what lay before them could be a great adventure, but the pitch black within the cave made them nervous. The torches they had brought with them were powerful and gave them confidence as they explored together. A few hours later, they were laughing and joking as they explored, but then one of the torches suddenly stopped working. They felt nervous, but none of them wanted to be the one to admit it in front of the others. I was just thinking it might be time to head back, said Sam. The others agreed, saying that they had been feeling that way too. And they began to walk back towards the entrance. They were silent at first, but soon they were laughing and joking again as the lights that they held in their hands gave them confidence to show them the way. They'd been heading back to the entrance for nearly as long as they had taken to walk in when their remaining torches stopped working. They froze in the darkness. "Stop messing about," said Sam. "I'm not," came the reply. "It's broken." Sam could hear the sound of a switch being turned on and off more frantically each time it was pressed. There was a discussion about what they were going to do, but they just couldn't agree. They were all petrified, but they were reluctant to admit it to their friends. Sam suddenly remembered the little pen light in his pocket that his parents had given him earlier that day. He'd felt too embarrassed to even turn it on when he'd seen the light produced by the other torches. He told his friends that he had it, but he also apologised because he believed it couldn't possibly give enough light to be helpful. Sam pressed the on button on his torch, and he was astonished by the result. When he had turned it on at home in the darkest room, and it had given out a little flicker of light, but here in the pitch black caves, the light seemed much brighter. Although it was nowhere as powerful as the other torches had been, the light showed the way through the darkness, and the friends found their way safely out. Even though the light was so small, it did give the friends confidence in the darkness. And it really is true. The light shines the brightest in the darkest of places. And I've shared with you today about how we need to make Jesus known. He's hidden to be made known. And as we think about telling people about our faith, your response might be, I wish Graham could tell them. Or I wish someone else would. I'm praying someone else would. And what I really want to encourage you is this, is that in the dark, that teeny tiny light appears even brighter. And you may even feel like this little light of mine, or yours, isn't bright enough to shine. And we're not going to sing that in a minute, just in case you're getting excited. That little light of mine, yours, you can let it shine because it's yours. No, we don't have to sing it, it's okay. I thought you were looking for music. No, we're not doing that. And so as you think about how you're going to share your faith, remember, the light shines through our cracks. It's not about you being the best salesperson in the world. It's about you authentically and genuinely letting Jesus shine through. So Jesus, we pray that you'd help us to let your light shine through us. Help us to be willing to be honest about our faith. Help us to be willing to make you known. As people might talk about the nativity story, or we can invite people to our service, help us to take those opportunities to share the good news. Amen.